Hi there, Bruce the Water Guy here. I'm at my activated sludge system. This one is an oxidation ditch, and this has two surface brush aerators. I'm standing in front of the drive mechanism for the aerator, which is about a 30-foot long, 18-inch torque tube with a bunch of paddles on it that have about 18 inches of water submersion to mix the 1 million gallon tank and add the oxygen or oxygenate the water. What we have here is a large motor attached to the gear drive mechanism, and this is a fairly expensive assembly. This is going to run about $35,000. Now, attaching this to this 30-foot long torque tube, which is very heavy, is what we call a flexible coupling. Let's take a closer look. So this coupling here is kind of a rubber type material that creates the mating surface between the drive mechanism and the rotor. That way, if anything happens on either end, the failure part will be this rubber coupling. Although it is still a few $1,000s, it is much cheaper than the drive mechanism itself, which is about $30,000, or an entire new rotor assembly, which is upwards of $60,000, $70,000. Now, unfortunately, we had a failure yesterday, and I'll show you what happens to this flexible coupling when things go wrong. So unfortunately, we had some sort of problem either with the bearing or a stub shaft, a shaft on the outside of the system that holds up the torque tube across the aeration basin that connects to the bearing. Something failed in that system. We're having trouble figuring it out right now, as this 30-foot span is mostly submerged underwater. This is the broken flexible coupling between the two mating surfaces. So you can see what happened is as the other end broke and let loose, and the side 30 feet away dropped down, lifting the entire shaft assembly upwards, bending the bearing on my far left there. It ripped that flexible coupling apart, therefore saving any damage from the other drive system and saving a lot of cost. So now that we have this thing out on the ground, we were able to get a closer look at it. Let me show you with the camera what we think happened. This is the piece that broke off. This area here is what sits inside of the bearing of this 4-inch shaft, which should be 4 inches. We believe that the bearing failed, seized up, and as it spun, it wore the shaft down from this thickness to this thickness until it snapped. But then, back here, where this attached to what we call the stub shaft going to the inside, there is a plate that would sit here in this area and this area, creating the water seal so that the water and scum doesn't leak into the pits. So then once this snapped, it was no longer supported by the bearing, and this end sat down on a 1/2-inch steel plate and wore itself out until it was enough wearing the hole around that this whole piece shoved inside of the plate. So once it pulled through the plate, you can see the depression under the hole where that whole shaft must have spun and kind of walked itself down along the wall to the left until it went under the water and was no longer touching anything. So this part of the shaft was spinning on the other side of the plate and wore through until that completely gave way. So this piece and this piece are all that was left on the inboard side by the bearing. This surface here is what wore through and rubbed on that inside plate until the entire shaft itself fell down in nearly 14 foot deep of water. So next to me here, you can see the brushes, what we call the brush aerator. Those are mounted on an 18-inch diameter tube called the torque tube. All of this seems to be in good shape and is reusable, although some of the brushes were damaged from removing them out of the decking where it was mounted. Those will be replaced. It's the end here. This plate has been damaged when it hit the bottom of the tank itself. We fabricated that, that's not a big deal. But on the end you can see that bolted structure. Well, that's that part that failed. We call it a stub shaft. It is a solid piece that's machined. We do happen to have one of those in stock. It needs to be heat treated at the finishing facility and cleaned up a bit before we can put it in. So our guys have a bit of work ahead of them. They did a really good job today, saving as much of the structure as they could, reducing our labor and money input to get this thing back up and running, which I'm hopeful that will get done in the next few days. So I hope that you're having a much better day than we are. This is Bruce the Water Guy. Have a nice day.